Hello and welcome. I'm Petty Officer Elliot Fabrizio. A NAV admin recently released announces significant changes to the enlisted advancement policy. These changes include reweighting several items in the calculation of your final multiple score and changes to the Command Advancement or CAP program. With me to talk about these changes, what they mean for sailors, and why they were made are the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Mike Stevens, and Fleet Master Chief for Manpower Personnel Training and Education, April Beldo. MCPON, Fleet, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So as you know, this NAV admin announces significant changes to our current policies. What prompted the change?
Well, Petty Officer Fabrizio, I think it's first important that we recognize this isn't the first time we've done this. That periodically we'll go back and we'll take a look at how we're advancing, how we're scoring our sailors, how the final multiples put together. We do that typically based on the feedback we're getting from the fleet. And that's what the fleet has asked us to do. They said, hey, can you take a look at this? Could we make sure that we have this right? And if we don't, could we make whatever adjustments we need to? So here we are. We've done it, and now we're having the conversation about it. Fleet?
And I would share with you also, Petty Officer Fabrizio, we do not do this in a vacuum. We do go out and we get input from the fleet. We do studies. We make sure that we're taking everything into consideration before we make a huge change like this.
So as we look at the new final multiple score for E4 and E5, there's a significant shift to put more weight on the test score and a little less on performance mark average. And then for E6 and E7, you see that kind of flip, and the majority of the weight is on your performance mark average or your evals with a little bit less on your test scores. What's the reason for that shift?
Well, during this conversation, you'll probably hear me refer back to the fleet on a number of occasions, because they were the drivers behind this discussion that we had and these changes that were made. There's a general consensus, and when I say general, that doesn't mean everyone, because certainly everyone's not going to agree. They never have, and we don't expect they ever will. But that's okay. We respect everybody's opinions and input as we've gone through this process. But there's a general belief and understanding that there needed to be more weight for our E4s and E5s on the exam portion, and there needed to be more weight on the performance portion for our E6 and E7 exams.
And I think leadership in the fleet has an expectation. When I talk about leadership, I'm talking about starting at the supervisory level. When that Petty Officer that Seaman, Fireman, Airman is taking the test for Petty Officer 3rd class and 2nd class, leadership's expectation is that they do know their occupational skill. And then as they rise to the level of E6 and E7, being ready to be in that management role, that their leadership and their performance base is more weighted. So I think that's why we did this change.
Another change in this NAV admin is that the Good Conduct Medal and its reserve counterpart no longer count toward award points. MCPON, is that going to slow advancement for sailors?
I think this is a good news story, because the reason that we've taken the Good Conduct Medal out and the Reserve Meritorious Service Medal out is that because the large, and I repeat, large majority of our sailors are working hard, staying out of trouble, and they're good and decent people. So across the fleet, we're seeing the majority, again, the large majority of our sailors receive this award. So to give a point for it was kind of a zero sum. We weren't really gaining anything. They weren't gaining anything by it. So we wanted to move that weight, those points somewhere else in the process. So we just removed it from the equation.
That makes sense, kind of like a common denominator.
Yeah, exactly.
And another change in the final multiple score breakdown is that service and pay grade has been reduced to only 1% of the final multiple score. And with the focus on technical knowledge and performance, why include service and pay grade at all?
Well, I'll let Fleet Master Chief Beldo talk about the specifics with service and pay grade. But I'd like to re-emphasize that where we're really placing the most focus is on a person's technical competency, which we judge by or grade by the exam, and a person's performance. So performance and technical competency is where we want the most weight. Fleet?
And if you could picture this, Petty Officer Fabrizio, when we have two sailors taking the exam, all things being equal, that 1% will determine the senior sailor, and that senior sailor will get the nod for promotion. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I mean, if all things are equal, it's kind of the tiebreaker.
It is, exactly. Thank you.
That service and pay grade is the tiebreaker.
Well, in the NAV admin, it also says that Now the only top 25% of sailors not advanced will receive PNA points, a change from 75% before. So that's 1.5 PNA points to the top 25% of sailors by test and 1.5 to the top 25% by evals. And it says your last 5 cycles will go toward this, maxing out PNA points at a total of 15 possible points. What is the reason behind this change?
We wanted to motivate and then incentivize sailors with the exam taking process. We wanted to encourage them to study really, really hard and do really, really well on the test. It's not just about passing the exam. It's passing the exam with flying colors, right? Even if you're not advanced. Because depending on the rate you're in, the rank that you're competing for, you could do well on a test but still not advance because of numbers. But we want to encourage those sailors to do really well on the test. And so by putting this 25% window in place, we believe that it will do that. It will motivate and incentivize them to do better on the exam.
Would you say that making this change to PNA points increases competitiveness?
I think what it'll do is it'll motivate, as I said earlier, sailors to really apply themselves and study really hard for the exam. Because let's be honest, if you're a petty officer and you're taking this test, you understand that you may not make rank, right, off this exam because your rate may be really tight and may be very competitive. You hope you do, but you might not. But regardless, you want to come out of this with something, right? So if you study really hard, I'll just say it, if you study harder than the next person, there's a high probability that you're going to get some PNA points off of this exam. So we believe it will encourage sailors to do better on the exam.
Well, this message also indicates that the CAP program is about to change, and it says the current CAP ends September 30th. Historically, most commands cap sailors right after the advancement cycle. This change looks like commands will have to select the sailors they want to meritoriously advance before the advancement cycle begins. What's the reason for this shift in timeline?
Well, Petty Officer Fabrizio, Fleet. So we've been having this conversation for nearly 4 years because we take the command advancement program very, very serious, and any changes we make to it, we want to make sure that we get them right. I'll let Fleet talk about the details, but what I would like to share with you, with anybody who's listening, is that the command advancement program has remained virtually unchanged in this respect. It is still designed to afford commanding officers an opportunity to meritoriously promote their best performers. That remains in place. That remains unchanged.
Petty Officer Fabrizio, historically what we'll do is we'll cap our sailors after the March exam and after the September exam. And as MCPON was sharing, it's not tied to the test. It's tied to our best performers within a command. So what we've done is we've made it a single capping season from 1 July of the fiscal year to 30 September of the fiscal year. And it gives the commanding officer an opportunity to observe her sailors throughout the whole year, and then when she chooses to cap that sailor that performing at the next higher pay grade, they can use that opportunity to do that. And this has nothing to do with the test. And what it also does is now that I have promoted that sailor to first class petty officer, let's say, she's not even going to be participating in the Navy-wide exam.
All right, so think about this for a minute. We used to take the exam, and then more often than not, we would then cap a sailor after the exam, right? So what we were doing unintentionally was we were overpopulating rates in a particular rank. So the next year when we would build the Navy-wide advancement exam, we may already be above 100%, so there were no opportunities to promote anybody on the Navy-wide advancement exam. So by capping first, then building the Navy-wide advancement exam numbers, what we do is we prevent that from happening, because we're not going to promote more off of the exam than's necessary to reach the number that we're looking for. So cap first, advancement exam second, allows us to better manage and maintain a stable rating health.
Well, that covers all the advancement changes. To learn more about these changes, you can visit All Hands Magazine online or read the NAV Admin on MPC's website. Thanks for joining us.